Greetings and salutations in our distance. This is Wolfphototech, and here we are with another delightful overview video. This time covering the Game Master's book of Traps, Puzzles, and Dungeons by Jeff Ashworth. He also has numerous other people who contributed to this book, and it shows as there's multiple people contributing to this book, as there is variation in some degree to the quality of the information in this book. However, I will talk about that as I go along. Please note that the book is generally all black with white text with a skull motif. It is a hardcover, fairly well made. It is actually a reasonable price, $29.99 US and $22.99 US and $29.99 Canada. So there you go. You open the book and you happen to have this like chain, ring chain in pattern. This is very much in line with the three colors of choice for this book. You got black and white and you got brown. So there you go. However, it does vary from here to there. So you don't always got a lot of brown mixed in, but you do have a lot of white and gray and black. This is just the general content section. It's fairly well organized. It's not the greatest organization, but it's still a little functional and decent. You got a brown page with, like a photo with a brown filter or a drawing or whatever. A little bit of information there. You got the foreword by Jim Davis and Jonathan Pruitt from WebDM. You got a section on the introduction, which basically explains the general structure of the book and gives you a bit of a key for the maps. And then you go into, after that, the one-shot adventures, which are a total of 3 adventures. Please note that these one-shots are heavy on the text. So you don't have very many maps, but you have lots of text, and then an occasional table with a bit of notes and explanations. And this is going to be like a standard thing that comes up with these maps, is that they're over-designed with numbers put on them directly. So you have the problem of they're overly complicated. There's too much detail. This kind of problem occurs with someone who does not play Dungeons and Dragons, does not DM Dungeons and Dragons, or it is a new Dungeon Master or player that happens to be an artist and they go overboard. General rule with maps and player aids and Dungeon Master aids is that less is more. You only really want to put enough into a map to convey an idea. You don't want to clutter it with tons of stuff. Otherwise, it becomes more difficult for dungeon masters and gamers to actually use the map. And it's not incredibly hard to use most of these maps. However, several of them do fall into that territory where if you have sensory overload issues, you're in the Asperger's autism spectrum, or various attention deficit disorder and so forth, overly complicated maps with a lot of detail tend to mess with those people with various neuro-non-typical traits much more than a simple line a minimalist map. So there is numerous occasions where I'm flipping through this book and quickly just reading bits and chunks of sections of this book. I'm going to skip past the 3 one-shots and get to the next section. There is numerous occasions when I've flipped through this book looking at a few things where it's wandered into that over-elaboration, complication of various things that result in issues for people that are non-typical. But then there's also sections of the book where it's not so bad, and it's actually fairly useful. There's stuff like this that is very grim tooth traps kind of thing. The painful traps, you get into the section where the painful traps, the deadly traps, the disruptive traps, and the complex traps. That is pretty much like grim tooths right here. So a lot of this stuff is basically, I've seen this before in grim tooths. So there you go. The artwork is done well. Still lots of text. It's fairly well organized, but yet, again, you know, a little much in areas. And I just flip through. Yet again, it's still kind of like humorous imagery and stuff like that. Stuff like that, you know. Bear and a sticky floor. I swear I've seen that one before in Grim Tooths. I've seen that one for sure. Skip past complex traps. Complex traps are traps that have multiple stages where they have like a trigger mechanism, and then they have a first stage on the trap, and then they have a secondary stage and a tertiary stage, and you could counter each stage as it goes along as a player. So like you fail the first stage, you could do something that bypasses or saves you from the second stage or the third stage. So there you go. And I skip through some more pages. Then you have a section on rhymes, riddles, ciphers, and gateway puzzles. This is fairly decent. Please note that the art style changes in this section from the largely humorous brown art to more of just simple sketches of objects and situations. Not overly complex. You got some ciphers, some basic ones. Gateway puzzles. Yet again, a lot of this book is a lot of text. You got another one of those double page age photo / artwork with brown filter over it. A word about dungeons. You have a section about chambers with the puzzle elements or active interactive components in them, which are fairly nice. However, as I said before, they range from anywhere from like they're usable, like this one, except for that they put brown numbers in bold boxes on there, to ones that are, that's okay. That is a little bit over elaborated in some ways. It kind of changes from time to time art style a little bit. And then you'll ever so often will get one that has a pattern, a disruptive pattern across stuff, or ones that are really over designed or over artified. You put too much details into a thing, people start wondering about, hey, what is that? I actually like this one a lot, but still. Most of these are in that okay, good to okay, but then you get to a point where you see some that have a, it's nice to have that artwork in there, all the gears. But then you get stuff like that, where you have to carefully read through the whole thing once or twice to make sure you understand why there's all those gears in that room. As if it's like a secondary level or something or else. That one I've seen before in Grimtooth for sure. Maybe even by the same name. You got some nice ones. I've seen something like that before in an adventure. Most of these maps are actually pretty decent. Some of them, as I said before, violate it that you have way too much detail and might actually be somewhat confusing to various players in the Dungeon Master. This one is actually one of the few cases where there is no numbers on the map, so you can actually use that for players. This one is probably like literally the worst one of them all. There's so much clutter in these rooms that it's hard to work out what are you actually looking at sometimes. It's actually a bunch of robots or constructs filling this whole area right here, and then gears all around the outside and parts. Yet again, someone with processing issues, visual processing issues, might not be able to visually sort out all the clutter in that room. I had to keep this in mind because, you know, I've dealt with people with neurological issues, and that's just literally because I was in with people with autism and ADHD and stuff like that. And I know that stuff like that really screws with them. Yet again, another one of those maps. It's extremely cluttered. Not all of them are like that. There's like somewhere around 10% of them. 5% of them are like absolutely, they're way too cluttered. Another 10% are like, depending on how bad a person has sensory overload issues, they might be too much. And then another 5 or 10% and are like, if someone has severe sensory overload issues, it's even from like the first 5 and 10%, the 25 to 35% and are just way too much stuff. Like, there's yet again another example of another heavily detailed old map. So the artwork is nice. It's just you have that edge point where you just have a lot of stuff going on in the piece of artwork. It almost seems to get worse as the book goes along in some cases. That is actually a pretty decent room right there. This is actually a usable map by the Dungeon Master or Game Master to show to players. Copy it off and use it. Yet again, so many of these maps have the numbers sitting right on the map itself, which makes it hard for a Dungeon Master to just pull it off and just use it, and then like white out the image, the numbers. You got some random tables in the back, and you got the legal information for the OGL, author acknowledgements, and the little section on the people that contributed to this book. Yep, and that's it. I say it's a fairly decent book. For the $22.99, I say it is in the worth to own territory, but it's not high on the worth to own territory. As in, like, if you have bought all the modules for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, or you have all the adventures for Pathfinder 2nd edition or Pathfinder 1st edition or whatever, I would definitely say, like, this is really in the, you really want to consider getting this. Yes, it's perfectly good. However, I'm not going to give a score on this, as I have yet to run these adventures. This is a brand new book that came in recently, and yeah. So there you go. If I ever run most of this book, at that point I will do a proper review of the book and then post that up when I do. So thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe and leave a comment below. And I hope you have a delightful day, a nice night, a wonderful week, and a magnificent month. And keep your stick on the ice.